extension to 3 years for protection provided former DoD officials. Can you give a rationale for why the protection needs to be extended? Does it have anything to do with the Justice Department's claims that Iran tried to harm National Security Advisor Bolton?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. What I would tell you is that we're constantly evaluating our security policies in light of current intelligence and the security situation. But as I'm sure you can appreciate, we're not going to comment on the specifics of what those intelligence assessments or security assessments might be. Thank you. Let me do one more from the phone here. Jeff Selden, VOA.
Hi, thank you very much. Two questions, one on Ukraine and one on Afghanistan. On Ukraine, we've heard from a number of senior Ukrainian officials warning Russia is likely to launch a new wave of cyber attacks, again, going after Ukraine's energy sector, financial sector, and that Russia is preparing some new cyber weapons that could be used beyond Ukraine. Wondering what the U.S. is seeing on this front and what the Pentagon is doing to support both Ukraine and other allies who might become targets. On Afghanistan, CENTCOM earlier put out a release about Exercise Eager Lion 22, noted participation of troops from Kazakhstan. Wondering, have there been any developments in the negotiations we heard about so long ago with Central Asian nations for possible basing agreements or permissions to help the U.S. counterterrorism mission now that troops are no longer in Afghanistan?
Yeah, Jeff, on your second question, I'll come back to it because I was having a hard time hearing specifically what you were asking about. On your first question, in terms of Russian tactics in Ukraine, beyond what we've already seen, both in Ukraine and elsewhere, certainly cyber is a capability that Russia maintains. I don't have any specifics to provide from the podium in terms of what exactly we're seeing on the battlefield in Ukraine, other than to say, that that is a TTP that they've employed, as you well know. And then, I'm sorry, your second question about Afghanistan, what was the specific question?
I was just wondering, we heard a lot a while ago, prior to the withdrawal of U.S. troops, about negotiations and talks with Central Asian countries for basing options so that the U.S. could continue its counterterrorism mission after the withdrawal. I noticed that Kazakhstan's participating in an exercise with CENTCOM, wondering if that means that there's been any progress or if there's otherwise any progress on that front.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so I don't have anything to announce today. Clearly, we maintain a counterterrorism capability in the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility. In terms of our partnerships with individual countries, again, I don't have any new announcements to make other than to say that it is a robust series of partnerships, and we have capabilities throughout the region to be able to provide a counterterrorism response should we need to. Thank you. Let me go back to the room here, sir.
Thanks. Travis Tritton with military.com. The Anti-Defamation League recently came out with an analysis of a data dump from the Oath Keepers group, which is an extremist militia. So leaders were charged for seditious conspiracy in January 6th. And they found that about 128 members or people who were involved in the group appeared to be in the U.S. military. I'm wondering if membership in the Oath Keepers would be considered extremist activity by the military, and would be troops prohibited from joining the Oath Keepers or a group like the Oath Keepers?
Yeah, so I don't have any specifics on the particular incident that you're describing, other than to say, DoD policy is clear. You cannot be an active member of a extremist group, and certainly where there are indications of that, the services, as appropriate, will investigate those. And so, in regards to those particular members, I'd refer you to the services to see, what if any status is on those individuals. Is there a
consensus on which groups are considered extremist groups? Or for example, is the Oath Keepers considered an extremist group by the Department of Defense?
I think DoD policy is pretty clear on what constitutes an extremist group, and so any group that meets that definition would fall within those boundaries. Let me go. Fall into those categories? Because I think that is a fair question. Let me go back to you and look on that one specifically. We'll take that question. Thank you. Laura?
Thank you. First, can you give us a sense of the Ukrainian casualties and how much equipment they've lost? I know we've heard some reports about how many casualties the Russians have had, but particularly interested in the Ukrainian side in this phase of the conflict. And
Sure.
then also, my second question is, can you comment on reports that Ukraine has captured several Russian generals?
On your first question, no, I'm not going to be able to provide details on Ukrainian casualty numbers nor lost equipment, especially while they're engaged in active combat, nor, as I'm sure you can appreciate, I don't want to provide an intelligent assessment from here. We have seen the reports, in social media, in media about captured Russian generals. I don't have anything to provide, again, to corroborate that information from here. Thank you. Let me go to Tom and then go back out to the phone.
Thanks, sir. Two questions. One is a follow-up from a briefing yesterday. Laura asked a question regarding Pentagon, Defense Department, U.S. support of Ukraine if they would go into Crimea, and the response was, we support, I'm paraphrasing slightly, we support any areas in the sovereignty of Ukraine. I just want to make sure that that Crimea is considered sovereign Ukraine.
Well, again, yeah, so, Crimea was part of Ukraine that was invaded by Russia back in 2014, so certainly Crimea is part of Ukraine.
I thought so, and I just wanted to make sure, because that's what had been said before, so thanks for that clarification. My primary question is also off Ukraine. What's the level of concern or flummoxing, or whatever word you'd like, among defense officials as to how Prime Minister Modi of India seems to be trending to become the Erdogan of South Asia?
I don't have a comment on that, Tom.
Do they think you consider that?
We have a very close partnership and relationship, defense relationship with India. We obviously will continue to work with India and further develop that relationship, but
They just participated in war games with Russia and China, which seems a little bit troubling to some people.
Again, India is a sovereign nation. They can make their own decisions in terms of who they're going to conduct exercises with. Certainly, we have appreciated our partnership with India in the region. They're an important partner, as you know, and we'll continue to work closely with them. Thanks, Tom.
Yes,
All right, we've got time for a couple more. Yes, sir.
Thank you. The Japanese Ministry of Defense announced that the Japanese Defense Minister Hamada will meet the Secretary Austin at the Pentagon tomorrow. So could you tell us a little bit about the agenda of the meeting? Will they discuss the response to the potential contingency in the Taiwan Strait?
Sure. The Secretary looks forward to welcoming the Minister to the Pentagon tomorrow. We look forward to a very fruitful discussion, and we'll provide a readout afterwards, but I don't have any previews to provide from here. Let me do two more. Let me go to Oren and then to Tara.
Over the course of the past 6 months, we've seen on occasion a reshuffling of Russian military leadership in Ukraine. For example, General Alexander Dvornikov was made the theater commander a couple months ago, give or take. I was wondering, first, is he still the theater commander? And second, have you seen continued or more reshuffling of leadership as Russia tries to figure it out or improve its battlefield success or tactics?
Yeah, thanks, Oren. So as I'm sure you can appreciate, I'm not going to discuss the chain of command of Ukraine here. I think that's really more appropriate for Russia. Same thing. I'd refer you to Russia to talk about their military and their staff and how they choose to organize. But thank you. Okay, Tara?
Thank you. If Ukraine maintains this kind of shift in momentum and stays on the offensive, does that change the equation as to what types of weapons the U.S. might offer in future rounds? And what types of weapons would that maybe expand to?
Yeah, so, I'm not going to speculate, but certainly we will continue to have that open dialogue with Ukraine in terms of what their needs are. And so certainly I don't think it's unreasonable to think that as the situation on the ground changes, and on that point, Ukraine has made some progress, but there's still a very tough fight. And a tough fight ahead. So I think we also need to keep that in mind. But to answer your question, I think it is reasonable over time to continue as we have that dialogue to hear what their needs are, to work with the international community, because again, it's not just the U.S. that's providing assistance, to make sure that they have what they need, not only in the immediate term, but also the middle and the long term. So,
give us a sense of what types of weapons that might include. Would that, possibly tanks, or what other types of weapons?
Again, I don't want to do that from the podium right now, other than to say that will be an area for continued dialogue. And as we have updates, we'll make sure to provide those. So, okay, you know what? Let me take a few more. All right. Okay, let me go to Louis, and then we'll go to the back of the room here. Louis.
Thank you, sir. Can you confirm that the United States held tabletop exercises with the Ukrainian military about this counteroffensive over the summer, and provided some input about what would work, what would not work? And also, with regards to the current situation there on the ground, is it the assessment that the Ukrainians would need a larger force in order to retain the gains that they've made territorially up in the Northeast?
So on the first question, what I would tell you, Louis, is that we do engage with the Ukrainians, at a variety of levels on the military side. As we've said previously, we do provide time-sensitive information to enable them to conduct operations and defend their homeland. I'm not going to get into the specifics of what that might look like. In terms of the Ukrainians and their ability to hold the territory that they've taken, certainly that is a question for the Ukrainians. I will say that the battlefield, as always, any battlefield is a dynamic and fluid place. We'll continue to monitor from our end and continue to keep our focus on supporting them in terms of the equipment and the resources that they need. But really, they should be the ones to talk about what their game plan is to secure and hold the territory that they've gained. Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Two questions. One, there is a debate going on as far as who is winner and who is a loser in Ukraine. But my question is that always innocent people, whether they are military or civilians, are the losers always, and they pay the price. Like here, thousands have been killed and millions are now homeless. So what do we learn as far in the future if a superpower like Russia invades a smaller, tiny nation? So where do we go, or what we learn? What is the message, sir?
Well, certainly, as in the case of Ukraine, as has been said by many, this invasion was unprovoked, illegal, and to your point, many innocent people have died, and that's a tragedy. And so again, from a Department of Defense standpoint, we'll continue to do our part to work with our international partners and our allies to support Ukraine in their fight to defend their country. And as I mentioned before, President Putin has the ability to end this conflict tomorrow by withdrawing his forces. But if he chooses not to, then we'll continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. Okay. Last one.
Thank you. As far as our own tragedy or terrible tragedy 21 years ago, 9/11, what do we learn and what's the message? Because still terrorists are still moving around in the region. And what is the message that you have to give our secretary?
Well, I think 9/11 demonstrated. First of all, it was a very terrible day. I mean, on a personal level, I was not physically in the Pentagon that day, but I was assigned to the Pentagon, and not to necessarily drag this out with personal stories, but it was a tough time for many of us. So it's a very real thing, and I think the last 20 years demonstrated that the U.S. military and the U.S. government, and in fact the world, international coalition, can address effectively the issue of terrorism. To your point, we still have a lot of work to do. History tells you that terrorism isn't going to go away. But I do think that over that time, as someone who grew up in the U.S. military during that time, we've developed a counterterrorism capability that's second to none. And if there's a threat against the U.S. people, our partners or our allies, we will find you and we will eliminate you. So we will continue to take counterterrorism very seriously. Okay. thank you very much, everybody. On that note, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.